My mother, Priscilla Ricardo, was born on January the 18th, 1948. I remember my auntie talking about her as I was growing up, constantly saying my mother was the princess of the family. She was the oldest of 5 siblings. She was also the last surviving member of all her siblings. She would be the first half of a perfect storm. My auntie from my mom's side was friends with my auntie from my dad's side. They hung out often, and my father saw my mother and was immediately attracted to her. He pursued my mother, who was just a little stubborn at the time. She played hard to get. But eventually they would start seeing each other, and they would fall in love. My father, he would be the second half of this perfect storm. Eventually, they would get married, obviously. You can see the smile on my dad's face. I remember before my father passed away, he was talking about my mother and how in love he was with her. He said that she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. I couldn't understand. As good as my father spoke about my mother, it didn't seem like it changed. It didn't seem like his love for my mother changed, but for some reason they didn't work out. But it was fun to hear my father talk about my mother. But if you listen to my mother talk about my father, it's a different story. Again, these two together, they absolutely made the perfect storm. My father volunteered to go to Vietnam. He did. He's a very proud American. He went over and he served 2 tours. When he got back, my mother and my aunt would tell me that my father was not the same man. He had changed. He had suffered from PTSD really bad. It caused a lot of stress on the relationship with my mother. My father would pop up in the middle of the night. If he heard a loud bang, he'd often be confused about where he was and who he's around. It's pretty scary for my mother to have experienced that. They used to fight all the time. Yell at one another. I remember hearing it. My father was an alcoholic, a social drinker. I mean, I shouldn't say a social drinker, but a functioning alcoholic. That's what they call us. I figured out my dad was always in the bar with his friends. He was the center of attention. He had to be. He was like a man's man. I literally seen pictures of him when he was in the Marines, swimming with hammerhead sharks. There's all kinds of stories about that. My father loved to swim with the sharks. So, he spent a lot of time in the bars away from the family, unfortunately, because too much dead time or quiet time was not good for him. That's too much overthinking, and it would lead to really bad thoughts. So my father's need to be out socializing with his friends and having drinks and laughing was his way of avoiding having to reflect on anything that happened in Vietnam. It wasn't until years later that I found out what really affected my father, because I couldn't understand why a person could do 2 tours and then suffer from PTSD. It would seem to me the second tour he would avoid it. While he told me this story, he said he was in a foxhole and gunfire had broke out. And there was a shooter shooting at his foxhole where he was located. and the shooting was relentless. So the shooter was shooting and screaming at the same time. My father could tell that the shooter was getting closer just by the sound of the voice. He couldn't do anything at the time, he had to wait. And eventually, as you probably figured out, the shooter ran out of ammunition. While my father knew he didn't have much time to get up, look at the shooter, and do what was necessary to prevent the shooter from killing him by shooting the shooter. Sure enough, my father popped up, and the shooter had loaded up his rifle and had put a bullet in the chamber just that quick and was lifting up his gun to start shooting. My father shot him. It killed him. The problem my father had was the shooter had to have been somewhere around 11 or 12 years old. My father said he had no choice. See, the Viet Cong used to grab kids and force them to fight, often sending them ahead of a lot of the raids, hoping to draw the enemy out so they could see where everybody's located. So from time to time, the people in Vietnam unfortunately had to shoot kids to defend themselves. That's the one part my father could never get over. He had no problems going to fight in the war. He had no problems doing whatever a Marine needed to do. But the one thing he can never get over is the part where kids are involved. It affected his life. So there you have it. The two of them together made the perfect storm. My mother had to deal with my father at a young age. The two of them were actually young, but my mother had to deal with my father's PTSD at a young age, and it put a lot of stress on their marriage. I remember when I seen this picture, I was thinking to myself, what's going through my mother's mind? She looks tired, she looks fatigued, she looks frustrated. And to probably add to her issues of dealing with my father, she also had to deal with something else. Me. Yeah. My mother and my father had kids. I was the oldest of 4 kids and the only boy. My mother dealing with my father's PTSD and his drinking and socializing while she stayed at home with the kids. And trust me, dealing with me, I'm no angel. That's for sure. I look cute. I look like a little angel even growing up. But the truth of the matter was, I was a little hellion. I was hard to deal with. I could not be controlled by anybody, not even my own father. I often did whatever I wanted to do and didn't care what people thought. This is, growing up, it was hard on my mother. She was a single mother of 4 kids after her and my father divorced. She just couldn't take it anymore. The constant fighting, the constant night out, my mom always wondering, and him being triggered over loud noises was just too much for her to deal with. To make matters even worse, shortly after I was born, my grandmother and my grandfather, my mom's parents, both were killed in a car accident. A drunk driver hit them and killed them both. That left a very young newlywed with a newborn responsible for 4 additional siblings, my mother's brothers and sisters. Now, they were old enough, don't get me wrong. I think my auntie was in her early 20s, and then the rest of my aunts and uncles were starting to become young adults, and some of them in their teenagers. My Aunt Yvonne was the youngest. I believe she was 14. But even so, my mom felt obligated to watch over her siblings and tend to them, on top of her kids, on top of dealing with her husband. I don't know how she lasted as long as she did. My mom's entire life was her family. When my grandma and my grandfather passed away, I think that was just too much for my mother. That foundation that she had was totally removed. My father dealing with PTSD, he had to deal with those demons the rest of his life. And my mother, it just was one heartache after another, after another. My Aunt Yvonne was the youngest of the kids. She was a total sweetheart. She had 2 wonderful boys. And they had to watch her die at a very, very young age. I don't think she was 36. And then one sibling after the other passed away. And that left my mom very lonely. She tried. She tried to raise 4 kids on her own, with the oldest being a boy. Growing up, oh, I hated the holidays. Hated them. There's only one holiday that I loved. One time of the year. It was Halloween. I used to like Christmas, but every year in our house, my room's next to my mother's, and I can hear her crying all the time. Every time I got around Christmas, I could hear her on the phone talking to my aunties and my uncle. She doesn't have any money for presents. In her eyes, that made her some type of failure. Man, when I grew up, I despised Christmas. Still to this day, I don't like it at all. Halloween is and always will be my favorite time of the year. See, my mom didn't realize I heard her crying. When I got older, she's like, "You used to love Christmas. What happened?" For years, I wouldn't tell her. I just hate it. I don't want to deal with Christmas at all. And then one day I told her. I said, "You want to know why I hate Christmas? Because every year I used to hear you cry. Cry that you couldn't buy us presents. And I just didn't like hearing my mother hurt. So I despised the holiday. And when I got older, my mom wanted me to change. She's like, "Son, that was then, this is now." It didn't matter. I'll never, ever forget that. The funny thing is, when Anita and I started dating, and our first Christmas came around, and she was all excited about it. She wanted to decorate and everything else. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not into it. And I explained to her why. I told her why I hate the holiday. I told her it's too hard for me to get into the mood. She insisted. So I let her decorate the house and the trees. But there was a problem. You see, I caught Anita stressing and crying. I said, "What's wrong?" Oh, she was reluctant. You see, she didn't have any money to buy her boys presents. There was like a couple of little cheesy presents under the tree. And she was crying about it. And she was trying to hide it from me because of what I went through with my own mother. As soon as she told me, I remember saying, "See, now I hate the holiday even more. Because now here was a woman that I loved, and she was going through the same thing my mother was. Since me and Anita were just starting out as boyfriend and girlfriend, she was reluctant to say anything. Well, as luck would have it, she got with the right boyfriend. You see, I have a lot of money. We spent like $6,000 on Christmas presents for the boys. We packed the tree up really good. It put a big smile on her face. I just wish I could have done the same for my mother when we were younger. I hate that damn holiday. My mother grew up. She remarried once. The man died quick. So she just had us brats. One of my sisters is missing out of here, the youngest. My sister Erica right here stayed with my mom the whole time she's been with my mom. The rest of us, well, of course, we flocked out. We spread out pretty thin. But my mom didn't just have us. My mom's got a flock of grandkids. Yeah, so there's 4 of us, but I think my mom has in all, let's see here, 17 grandchildren. And for the record, my sister Erica, she never had any kids. mom used to say, great. Typical Mexican family. She also had great grandkids too. So she had all of them around. Most of the time. We'd drive her crazy. In 2013, my father would pass away first. And with him, all the demons that haunted him his entire life. My father is at peace. And on January the 18th, 2022, on her birthday, her 74th birthday, my mother would pass away. 1 month before the 9-year anniversary of my father's death. And with her, all her pain is gone. So my hopes are, with my father at peace and all his demons gone, and my mother at peace with all her pain gone, that they somehow found each other again. And this time around, there's nothing interfering with their happiness.